A young girl walking home from school found a small pile of Polaroid photos lying in the gutter. There were 20 in all, neatly wrapped in a rubber band. She picked them up, and as she walked, she started to browse. The first photo was that of a ghostly white man on a black background, standing just far enough away from the camera that she couldn't make out his features. The girl slid the photo to the back of the stack and looked at the next one. The photo was of the same man, now standing a bit closer. The girl flipped through the next several photos quickly. With each one, the man in the picture came a bit closer, and his features were a bit clearer. Turning the last corner to her house, the girl noticed that the man in the photo seems to be looking at her, even when she moved the stack from side to side. It frightened her, but she kept flipping them over, one by one. By the 19th picture, the man was so close, his face completely filled the frame. His expression was the most horrifying the girl had ever seen. Walking up the driveway, she turned to the last photo. This time, instead of an image, there were 2 words. Close enough. Hearing a scream, the girl's brother rushed to the door and opened it. All he saw was a pile of photographs lying on the doorstep. The top one looked like an extremely pale version of his sister, but she was standing too far back for him to be sure. My grandmother grew up in the slums of Prohibition-era Chicago. Her family lived in a small house near the harbor, and one of her earliest memories was of a particularly hot summer when, seeking respite from the heat, she and her sister discovered a seldom-used section of boardwalk near an abandoned warehouse. Every night for several weeks, the 2 girls would make their way down to the docks and sit together on the edge of the pier as the sun went down. My grandmother vividly, and for a time fondly, recalled the feel of the seaweed between her toes as she and her sister dangled their feet into the murky water. It wasn't until years later that she returned to the pier and found that the warehouse had been demolished. Curious, she made an inquiry with the Department of Planning and Development. Apparently, the warehouse had been owned for a time by the mob, who was using it as a base of operations for a local prostitution racket. It had only been uncovered when an associate began disposing of rival hookers by fitting them with concrete shoes and dumping them into the harbor. Investigating officers had recovered nearly 24 bodies from the waters of a secluded pier nearby. How had the bodies been discovered? A passing fisherman spotted some of the victims' hair floating near the surface of the water, like seaweed. This week, I moved into a new house. The house itself is lovely, with 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a fenced-in backyard, and a big kitchen. The tree in the front yard is tall and strong and does a fine job of blocking my living room windows from the street. The water pressure is great, the closets are large, and the wood floors are new. The only problem I've had so far is that my neighbors are rather loud. Our houses connect on one side, so we share a living room, bedroom, and kitchen wall. All day long I can hear them banging around their kitchen, watching loud movies, talking, and their small child crying. It's a bit annoying, but nothing I can't live with, I suppose. Now, to get directly to the thing that really concerns me. It started when I was in the shower this morning. I usually like to have music playing while I shower, but today I decided that I'd rather just enjoy the silence. The activity was fairly uneventful until, as I was in the middle of washing my hair, I heard my neighbors talking from the other side of the wall. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but it sounded strange to me. It seemed that they were mumbling something, whispering, and occasionally laughing quietly, but I couldn't figure out how I could hear them if they were evidently speaking quietly. I thought that they must be standing absurdly close to their side of the wall in order to be so audible in the midst of my shower. I didn't think too much of this incident until I was leaving for work an hour later. As I started to open my car door, I turned back to the house, feeling like I'd forgotten something. As I looked up at my bedroom window, I realized that the neighbor's house shares a wall on the opposite side of the house from the bathroom. On the other side of the bathroom lies my bedroom closet. Susan Elliott was always coming home to her drunk boyfriend. She loved him, though she was sick of how belligerent he would become while intoxicated. She believed in holy protection and decided that one night she was going to try and use her practices on herself to see if it could relieve her from his anger. It's 11 p.m., barely 1 hour before he arrives home. She sprinkles handfuls of what she knows as holy salt around her bedside. She was told in a class at the local psychic shop that this salt was used to keep unwanted evil spirits away. She now lays in bed and waits for his arrival home. 11:37 p.m., he walks through the door. She can tell he's wasted. She dreads his sweaty palms around her neck and the breath of vodka and gin. He starts panting after he lays down in bed and says he can't breathe. He says he feels like he's having a heart attack and screams at her to get him some cold water. Susan rushes upstairs to get a glass of water, but decides she's going to add a few drops of holy water to it. He starts chugging it. He instantly starts throwing up. "They are trying to get out of me! It burns!" he yells. He starts panting more and is now rolling around on the bathroom floor, screaming in pain. She calls 911 out of panic. She's afraid she's hurt him, or that he is going to hurt her. The 4 minutes it took the ambulance to arrive felt like years, she said. The paramedics rush in to find nobody but Susan. She panics, looks around frantically, and tells them he was just there, in her own bathroom. The police officers ask for her boyfriend's name, occupation, any information on him they can get. She knows it all and briefly tells them about him. The police officer runs his name through the database. He doesn't exist. To this day, Susan still hears the screams of her non-existent boyfriend in her sleep. You've never liked the silence. Ever. At first you thought it was just something you were scared of. For no reason. But as you grew older, you realized that there was a reason. There had always been a reason. You've always slept with your creaky ceiling fan running, no matter how cold it was. You'd take extra blankets. You'd shiver, but you'd never switch the creaky thing off, because you knew how much you dreaded the silence. Because you knew that once it was silent, you'd hear them. At first, it had started out as soft hissing noises. You'd ignore it. But then you'd realize that it sounded like someone was whispering something to you. It took you time to decipher them. You finally did. You'd never forget it. They had told you about the underworld, about hell, the place where everyone went once they died. There was no heaven. There was only hell. They told you about the creatures there, how every monster you'd ever feared was real. They told you terrible things. Then they told you how your grandfather's soul was inching closer to hell, to death. You remembered being at your grandpa's funeral the very next day, shaking, more out of fear than grief. They were real. It was real. Since then, you've never allowed the silence to envelop you while you slept. You're scared you'll hear them. The things they spoke about still gave you nightmares. You've never slept in complete darkness either, because that's when you see them. My friend slipped. I watched her face go from complete happiness to unsuspected terror. The cracking of the ice gave my neck shivers, and my heart skipped at least 3 beats. I reacted quickly, but too late. I watched her disappear, and in the blink of the moment, I jumped to follow her. The water was freezing. I felt my fingers and toes become numb immediately, with the pain of the process overwhelming me. I could feel myself sinking, and with only the thought of saving a friend in my head, I dragged my already exhausted body to the lake floor. She was unconscious. It wasn't a surprise, but her usually bright skin had fallen to a sickly light shade. Her eyes were closed and rolled back as her eyelids fluttered. Her mouth was open, and I knew water would be spilling into her lungs. Freezing, numbing, painful water. I hooked my arm around her and pulled her upwards. She wasn't heavy, luckily, but with the weight of my own body against my weakening muscles, I felt useless. I pulled upwards with one arm as my left leg lost all feeling. I saw the ice at the top of the lake and searched for the large, cracked hole we had both fallen through. Holding my breath was getting hard, and I felt the mistake of letting out breath hitting me. I panicked. My heart raced. Blood seemed too heavy as it flooded my veins, pushing around my body at incredible speeds my heart could never keep up with. And then I felt it stop. It was a split-second moment. That skips a beat feeling, but eternally. I knew it wasn't going to restart. The whole time I was staring at the face of a girl as pale as snow, as cold as ice, as dead as me. It didn't occur to me how quickly the ice could freeze over. I have a beautiful smile. Oh, how I miss it. This morning I wake up and I smile at my bedroom mirror. I am disappointed at what I see. I kiss my husband, I send my 2 children off to school. I entertain guest friends. I show them all my lovely smile. But I look in the mirror and I do not see it. "Are you ready?" Harry calls from the pub. "Yes, my love," I reply, as I clasp a string of polished pearls around my neck. "Oh, fantastic! The children are with Mrs. Knox, and the dinner reservations are all set for 8 o'clock sharp," Harry beams as he enters our bedroom. He crosses over to me and puts his arms around my waist and tells me how darling I look tonight. I embrace him warmly, but suddenly I feel his arms stiffen. Vivian? Harry stutters. Yes, dear? I answer sweetly. In horror, Harry raises a shaking finger over my shoulder and points at the old full-length mirror against the wall. Your reflection, it can't be. Is it staring at us? I turn and see her there, gazing intently. She throws herself against the mirror. There is no sound, only deafening silence. Harry, help me, she mouths as she batters the surface with her fists. I feel my eyes narrow at her. Harry looks back and forth between myself and my abhorrently perverse reflection. My limbs begin to elongate, and dear Harry's blue eyes widen. He shrieks and struggles as I grasp him. My jaw detaches. My face contorts and splits open at my mouth, my teeth like shined and piercing knives. Vivian claws at the mirror. She beats against it as I devour her hapless husband. Perhaps now, she will learn to smile for me.